Welcome to Charting New Paths in Pre-K through 12 Education, a podcast by Solution Tree. In our authors segment, we invite our new and best-selling authors published by Solution Tree to share their expertise and valuable insights with you. Listen to this segment and add another tool in your toolbox of research-affirmed, classroom-ready strategies to improve student outcomes. I'm your host, Pisma Lopez Marin. Enjoy today's episode. Hello, everyone. In today's episode, the book we'll be talking about is titled Literacy in a PLC at Work, Guiding Teams to Get Going and Get Better in Grades K through 6 Reading. Authors Paula Maker and Jackie Heller help new and experienced K through 6 educators navigate reading and language instruction through the lens of professional learning communities, PLCs at work, instead of focusing on a particular instructional methodology. This valuable resource can help individuals and teams learn how to collaborate around literacy data to answer the 4 critical questions of learning. All right, we are joined by the authors of this book, Paula Maker and Jackie Heller. We're so excited to have you here. Paula is an educator, a consultant, and advocate for learner-centered education. She has over 24 years experience as an elementary teacher, literacy specialist, instructional coach, Title I program coordinator, campus administrator, director of elementary literacy, and director of instructional design. Jackie focuses on building capacity and collect efficacy with teachers to ensure all students learn at high levels. As a literacy teacher and coach at Mason Crest Elementary, she helped the school become the first national model professional learning community to receive the DeFore Award. So exciting to have you here. Thank you so much for your time, Paula and Jackie. Thank you for joining me for this episode.
Good morning. Nice to see you.
Good morning. I love being able to watch Jackie's face when you brag about her because she does not. She's so humble.
Did I roll my eyes? I tried not to.
And the rest of us are like, oh, it's Jackie Heller. Anyway.
Yes.
Good morning.
Same thing with you. But with both of you, it's just like I know it's a lot of words that I'm saying, but I'm like, before obviously I planned for this, and obviously like I prepared for this, so I obviously stalked you both before doing this, and so I'm like, this is just like the bullet points of a brochure. But if you actually like made a book of your life, like I can't even imagine what else your journey has, and that's kind of what I want to get into a little bit. Before we get into your book, I do want to get to know a little bit more about you. So, Jackie, at a point in your career, you were a reading recovery teacher, Title I teacher, and reading resource teacher, among so many other things. Can you tell us about your experience in these roles and what you saw in the field that inspired your focus to advance literacy?
Yeah, I was a horrendous reading teacher, and absolutely horrendous. My first job in education was teaching 4th graders, and I had about a third of my class that read on a 1st grade level, and I didn't know what to do with them. And so it was kind of a circuitous path that eventually got me here. But the backstory is, growing up, I was a math person. I love logic and problem solving and numbers. And so undergrad, I was a finance and business major, and I worked in the business field for a couple of years. And when I wasn't all that motivated to come in on a Monday to find out what the sales numbers were on the weekend, I went back to school and thought I would use that love of numbers to be a middle school math teacher. And so I did that, but the first job I took was as a 4th grade teacher. And I was an awesome math teacher, right? Like, this was, I don't know if there's people old enough listening to us, but if you started teaching in the 90s, you might remember that there was actually a Barbie that said 4 different phrases. And one of the phrases was, math is hard. So I was determined, like, there was going to be no females with math anxiety in this class. I could teach math. But when it came to reading, I didn't know what to do. I was not prepared by my teacher education program. Back then, we were just having the entire class read the same novel. But if kids are reading 3 grade levels below, they couldn't access that text. And so every workshop and professional development and recertification and summer class that I attended was all about how to help kids learn to read, because that's what I needed to know. And if you take enough of those, then the school reading teacher eventually starts asking you to present with her. And if you take a few more, you guide. And so my niche within the literacy instructional coach role was that love of problem solving that I had in math. I really took it to one of the biggest problems is we have so many students who cannot read at grade level, and that's holding them back not just from learning in every other content area, but a lot of the schools we work with, our kids are leaving elementary not literate enough to be ready to apply for a driver's license as a teen. Like that's not preparing them for life. So it's still that problem solving love, but in a different way.
That's amazing. See, just with that introduction, you say it so eloquently and so free that you so happen to have been a business person in college and doing all of those amazing things. And then all of a sudden your journey led to where you are now. And so that is not common for a lot of people. It's kind of like saying that you went into the army and then all of a sudden you're working in retail. But it's amazing. It is part of your journey, and that's how that led you to where you are now, which I'm sure Paul also has a different journey as well as to how you began, right?
Oh yeah, nobody lets me speak math. Um, and ironically, like it's so funny because Jackie is one of my dearest friends, and she's a math brain. That also she's just a brain. Let's just stop there. But two of my very best friends, Christine and Kim, are both math like gurus and passionate about it. And so, yeah, I'm always warned, especially when I go on national broadcasts or international broadcasts. Paula, don't talk about math. Just don't just keep it surface, sister, keep it surface. And so no, my journey also is like Jackie, both of us found ourselves in education after we designed this other career for ourselves. And my goal in college was to become a professor of theater. I loved Shakespeare, loved Restoration theater and historical context of dramaturgy and all these things. And I wanted to be a Shakespeare professor. And I actually became a teacher because we had a group of college scholarship winners, and we were to go into inner city schools and rural schools and talk to scholars about Shakespeare and the theater. And through this engagement with the community and with schools and with scholars, the minute I graduated, I went right back and re-enrolled to become a teacher because I fell in love with being able to serve in that capacity and bring the joy of learning to scholars. And so that was really fun for Jackie and I both to explore how we needed support and what we needed in order to be successful and what we felt like we could continue to offer to our colleagues. And teachers are our favorite people, second only to scholars, but it was a lot of fun to talk about our journey too.
That's amazing. Both of you. See, this is what I'm talking about. And I didn't know the first part. I guess I didn't do my stalking very well, but that's
No,
amazing.
it just, girl, our history is just so long.
You stalk our social media, you'll just find dogs. So
Social media doesn't go back to the 1990s. How would you have known? Like it was
Very true.
stone. It was chiseled into boulders at that time.
No, I
So
grew up in the 90s. I was born in '89, so I'm aware. If you say gigapet to
yeah,
me, I
that's
know
not
what that is.
helping. That's not helping. Nice of you to
yeah.
to be two in the 90s. But
Yes, yes.
yeah.
Um, so Paula, among other positions throughout your career, you were an elementary teacher, instructional coach, and director of elementary literacy. What did you see in the field that encouraged you to go from a teacher to guiding teachers as an instructional coach?
Right. I didn't want to. I did not want to leave the classroom. I mean, like I still think, like I joke all the time. Jackie and I both have talked about this. When I retire, I want to go back in the classroom. I want to go back there. It's where I was happiest, the most fulfilled, and as an instructional coach. But I spent 17 years of my career in those roles. And I still wonder what it would be if I were in the classroom and the things that I've learned now and I still get to be in classrooms. I just don't get to have a group of scholars that I'm serving consistently. But I think that what has happened to many educators is that someone sees something in us that is um, passion and commitment and dedication. And I think also I'm just always learning. Like, I'm not saying there wasn't a time in my career where I was completely arrogant and cocky. That is so true. And I have so many disgusting examples of that. Like when I thought I knew it all, I went to PD yesterday. I know it all. And I learned very quickly that there was always something more to learn. And it was always this idea of what's next. Okay, well, that was a disaster. What's next? And I had an amazing principal who came to me and she said, have you ever thought about coaching other teachers? And I was like, oh, no way. I'm never leaving the classroom. And she said, no, I'm not. I'm not actually asking you. I'm going to move you next year into a instructional coaching role. And I have to say, I am so grateful for that move because I loved it. Rick DeFore in his book In Praise of American Educators has a quote that I don't have any tattoos because of needles. I don't like needles. I wish I did, because then I feel like I would have all these cool, like, awesome art. Just like, look at this quote, look at this quote. But Rick DeFore has a quote that says, teachers do not need to be supervised, they need to be supported. And I feel like that's where that vision that Heather Machen had for me all those years ago back at Earhart Elementary, that is where I feel like I believe that. And I think that's where my passion shifted into how can I support scholars by supporting the people that lead them. And that has exponential impact. And so that's kind of how it happened. And I loved it. And I still get to coach just about every day. And it is an exceptional honor. I will say that.
But yet, when you retire, you say you would.
I'm going back.
Both of you,
I'm going 5th grade. Y'all hold a spot for me in 15 years. I want a 5th grade classroom, but it can't be math, obviously. Christine won't be math, but I definitely, no, I want to go back. I want to go back in the classroom. I do. I miss it. I love it.
I was working with the school district last week, and we spent part of the day doing some classroom observations to try and see, are we getting the highest levels of learning possible? And the superintendent, the principal, were with me, and I would go into a classroom and sit crisscross on the rug next to the 2nd graders and whisper, what are you learning today? And then come out, we debrief in the hall and go into the next 5th grade room and go talk to the kids. And the superintendent kind of looked at me funny after the first couple. He's like, you're really comfortable just getting right down there with kids. I'm like, comfortable? Like, that's my desired place to be. You should be impressed that I'm comfortable speaking to adults about this, because my natural inclination is to be sitting with the kids on the carpet, learning together with them.
Girl. You know what I'm impressed with, Jackie? That you could actually get down crisscross applesauce. See,
me too.
It's getting up. I need like all the kindergartners to pull me. I'm like, okay, who's ready to lift some weight? Let's go. Leverage, kids. Put your muscle into it. I'm
very specific which shoes I wear on days I know I'm going to be in the classrooms.
Oh, you're very hands-on. You're very available. That's so very inspiring.
Well, you should be cautious of anyone who is coaching education that is not.
So can you tell us more about your current role in education? Whoever wants to start with, Paula.
Sure. I have the best job ever, and I am still confused about why I get to do it. But I get to serve schools in building systems that support all scholars learning at high levels. And of course, through the professional learning communities at work model, through the RTI at work model. And then also additionally, now that Jackie and I have branched out into building a literacy platform for collaborative teams, being able to serve schools across the United States, serving teacher teams so that they are lifted up and supported, and they have somebody there to nudge and push and disrupt just enough so that there's growth and there's learning and there's cheerleading and there's this immense sense of gratitude. I think that's probably what most people feel about consultants. They get it wrong in that, when you consult, that you are telling people what to do. And I think the way, at least that I look at it, and I can speak for Jackie because we're practically the same person. I think that's not what it should be. It's coaching. It's being there side by side, shoulder to shoulder, boots on the ground, coming in the center of the table saying, how can I serve? How can I help? What do you need? How can we dig in? Here are some tools and resources and ideas that I want to share with you, but let's come to the table together and figure this out. And that, I think, is the most wonderful thing about what we get to do every day, and especially when we partner with Solution Tree, who is bar none, the leader in making sure that teams are supported.
I think one of the things that both of us are really good at is we lead with guiding questions. Oftentimes teams don't know what they need to do in order to get better. And so by asking the right questions, we can unearth that with them and then make sure we tailor any protocols or tools or strategies that we share with them to really what is going to meet them where they are and move them forward. I think we both have a really strong sense of urgency. This is purposeful work we're doing. In fact, the subtitle of the book, I was told, like, when they read this, they hear it in our voices, get going and get better. It's not just about, hey, let's learn some things about literacy. It's now apply it, get going, get better, because that's what we need to do to help all students be literate.
But it's one of those things that it sounds very much common sense, but at the same time, there's just so much that is being thrown at educators that having people, having a dynamic like both of you to make it happen and encourage others, I feel like it creates more of a movement rather than some additional duty that they have to do.
That's a really good way to look at it. It should never be compliance. It's not about compliance, it's about engagement. See, you're one of us now, Prisma.
One of us. Only because I get to see behind the scenes everything that I see and hear you do. And I'm like, oh, as women in leadership, in the roles that you are as leaders in your sector and just as professionals, you're people to look up to, just as, a young professional out here trying to, see the world, trying to make it, So I see both of you and it's like, man, they to me, you already have it. You've made it and you are beyond expectations. And to you, you're just trying to make things in the world a better place. So you're very wonderful.
Man. Well, there's some imposter syndrome happening right now.
I know. I was like, we need to end this now before she finds out the truth.
All right, wrap that up. That was great.
That was my closing.
No, I think that is really important to us as well. And I appreciate that, especially to support women in any field, but in education, women as leaders are still, although we're the majority in classrooms and leading classroom instruction, we are the minority in leading systems. And so I really appreciate that you said that. I think that's probably one of the highest compliments we could be paid. I don't know, Jackie, I'm speaking for you too, but I think that's, I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry. Go ahead, Jackie, say something.
It is. I think because both of us come from a place of we got into this in order to figure out how we could get better because we didn't see ourselves as leaders in what we were doing, right? Like we knew it was important work and we had to get better at it. And it's been years and years and years. So now that we're farther down the road than many others that we work with, we can look back and say, okay, let me pull you under my wing and kind of cut to the quick. And here's what we've learned along the way that might accelerate your journey. But we definitely don't see ourselves as, up there and done. We love learning. And whether that's with students or teachers or each other, like writing this book really was it was hysterical, but it was also some of the best professional development, because when you have to question, wait, why should they do this? Who do we cite? How do I know this? What was your take on this? Because I'm from Virginia, Paula's from Texas. We didn't actually ever teach together. We came together once we were both instructional coaches working with Solution Tree. So when you rely on your knowledge of what you've been doing in the classrooms and what you've been doing with teams, but you've been working with different teams in different states with different standards, yet you find that commonality, okay, then this really is what works.
Oh,
Mhm.
that's so cool. All right. So as you do reflect on your career's trajectory and writing books, what advice do you have for educators that are hesitant on writing their first book?
That'd be me. Hesitant. Um, so my first book I actually wrote with some colleagues that I'd worked with for 10 years. And we worked together at Mason Crest. After we won the DeFore Award, we had hundreds, about 300 visitors came through the following year and wanted to see, like, what does this look like? How do we do this PLC thing? Let's see it in action. And most people could figure out how to do it for the upper grades, but we kept getting asked, what about us by early childhood educators? Because what does data look like when you're working with kindergarten and preschool and even first grade? And so we eventually wrote a book called What About Us? But we had worked together for 10 years. So it was really easy to speak in one voice and finish each other's sentences. And then when it came time to write this literacy book, and it was so needed, like I knew this literacy book had to be written even when we're in the midst of writing that other book. And I still had teenagers at home I was raising and other things, and we kind of put it off. But there was no way that I was going to be able to address all the complex needs in literacy just from my singular vision. And so you take that along with the fact that most of us working as coaches in the PLC at work area, we thrive in a collaborative environment, right? Like we were drawn to working in PLCs because one of the big ideas is we collaborate. So having a co-author was a non-negotiable. Like we had to have multiple people in on this. And as I said, like there are people that I trust with the PLC process. Paul and I happened to train at the same time, and we were the last class that were trained by both Rick and Becky. And so that's a huge honor and responsibility. We dubbed ourselves the legacy group because we really feel the weight of carrying that work forward and being true to the original architects of this. So I knew she and I were on the same page PLC wise. And literacy is part of the national dialogue right now. There's a lot going on with, the resurgence of the reading wars from decades ago. And we are also aligned in how to teach literacy. So it was really the perfect partnership. So that would be my advice to anybody considering writing a book. If you're hesitant at all, really consider co-authoring instead of going solo. I learned so much from my fellow authors that made the book so much better.
Yeah. I would say don't do it. Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
A lot of words.
No. Listen, I think the thing that prevented me for so long, I had so many ideas. I have a list of we have a content development specialist who actually is just an amazing woman and champion for women. Claudia Wheatley she's just talk about somebody who speaks a vision, actually demands a vision from you. She's just phenomenal.
Pushes and nudges that vision.
Yeah, okay. So a bit of a nag, but in a very good way. And she is relentless in asking, especially women in our field, to have their voice heard. And so I kept making lists of all these books I wanted to write. And Claudia's like, well, I'm waiting for, this or this. And I think I had talked myself out of having a voice that was important enough to write it down, because I'm not, and although research is a very deep part of what we do, I'm not a researcher, I'm a practitioner. I take and curate research, and then I make it applicable and actionable and responsive. And so all the things that I wanted to say was based on someone else's research and how I applied it. And I thought, well, but they've already said it. So I think what Claudia taught us, as well as Douglas Reif, who is also just a phenomenal human being and an encourager of all things, both empowering educators to be writers, but also empowering people to follow their dreams, which is beautiful in a partnership. Both of them have said, yes, okay, so someone else may have said it this way, but you have a unique perspective in how you portray this work or this idea or this concept, and your voice is needed. And I think that was where I felt like, okay, maybe I didn't invent the PLC process, but man, have I found some ways to help teams strengthen their collaborative processes. And man, I've got experience turning 3 schools from, improvement required into top performing schools. And that I think is something that I just needed to hear. So I want to say that to anybody who's still on the fence about, well, do I really have anything to say? And Jackie and I talk about imposter syndrome all the time. It is a real thing. I would say your voice matters and your perspective matters. And don't worry about it being perfect. Just get the words down. And then the editing team, I promise you, will help you sound like you know what you're talking about. Because if it weren't for them, there would have been no research. It would just been Jackie and I saying, and here's another thing you should try, because we wanted so much to be about the practical application part of this. And I think there's just so much support surrounding you as an author, particularly with Solution Tree, that don't wait, just step into it. Step into it.
Yeah. And step in, even if you don't have the exact end in sight. Much of what this book became was shifted sitting in a subway parking lot with a phone dying plugged into the car when we were on a writing weekend. And we were working with Amy Rubenstein, who's amazing. We're like, Amy, we got a quick question for you. Can we just call and ask a quick question? Because it was on the weekend. It turned into an hour-long conversation where she told us to cut 2/3 of what we had written and refocus. And it made sense. So it wasn't the initial plan that we had, but things shift and move. That's real life. It's what we do in education every day with kids. And the same thing will happen when you write a book too.
Prisma, do you remember? I mean, I don't know if but have you seen in antique stores this thing called Encyclopedia Britannica? Like the Encyclopedia Series. And it's like an 80 volume. That literally, Amy was like, okay, are we writing a 12 volume, like tome about, or are we going to help teams? And it just, it is a process, not a product. And I love that Jackie said it doesn't have to be the end in mind. It has to be your voice and your ideas. And you have a team of people that help shape it into something pretty incredible. So, yeah, I would say listen to Claudia.
Yeah, always. She knows what she's saying. I love her energy. It's so contagious too. It's just like she's so dynamic too. But thank you. I'm so glad that I asked this question because I'm gonna be honest. I work for this company, but I just didn't know that side of it. I'm in marketing, but this other side, it's like, whoa, you guys, this is your there's this part of like your life's work, the things that practitioners. But then this whole book was like you were trying to make the whole thing. You were trying to make a Britannica, thing, but you never know. You could write a second book in addition to this is like you said. There isn't you don't have to have an ending that's just like that's it and that's where we end. Like it's not like math. How math, it's for the most part, it's very like this is what it is. Like this book was just like the beginning. I feel like because you guys are not done. I don't think.
We heard the phrase, leave that for the next book often. Leave that for the next book. Okay.
That's amazing. Oh,
yeah.
All right. So let's get into your book. I'm going to say the title again, Literacy in a PLC at Work, Guiding Teams to Get Going and Get Better in Grades K through 6 Reading. This book not only covers literacy as strategies, but it's aligned to the PLC process. How was that bridge created?
Oh my gosh, how was that bridge created? I'm gonna throw it to Jackie in just a second, but I do want to say it is a process and it applies to any content, anything that involves ensuring students learn, whether it's career tech courses, whether it's the arts, athletics, social studies, it applies. But I think where Jackie in particular, when I met her 100 years ago, she kept saying, why do people think that it's so complicated through literacy when this is probably the one content strand where we need it the most in order to parcel out all of the expectations that are placed upon literacy educators and literacy scholars. And, of course, we would lament, well, we need that book. Math has the book. And, well, secondary has a book. And we just didn't have this guide for literacy teams because so many people thought that literacy had to be its own thing, and a professional learning community sort of orbited around the content instead of content being the PLC process is the vehicle, and the content is what we're learning about so that we can ensure all students learn. But I want Jackie to share her story about being super frustrated and a flight delay. And I just told the story. But anyway, go, Jackie.
Solution Tree has a contract with the Department of Education in Arkansas. So there's lots of associates that work there. And we had a training weekend years ago where we got together and we kind of said, okay, we've got a 3-year contract with each of these schools. How are we laying out those 3 years? What are we focusing on in year 1 and year 2? We're going to tailor it to what they need. But in general, we want some commonalities across what we're doing with all the different coaches are working on. And so we broke up into the coaches that were doing some leadership coaching and the ones that were doing math coaching and the ones that were doing literacy coaching. And I obviously was part of the literacy coaches. And we kept looking over at our colleagues at the next table that were doing the math coaching. And Solution Tree has a whole branch called Math at Work and DNA Math. Like, they've got so many resources to draw from. They were having trouble deciding which one to go after first. Whereas our literacy colleagues said, well, I use this article and I refer to this book, but literacy is really complex. And depending on whether a school needs to focus on informational reading or they aren't developing their writing well or whatever it is, you could draw from so many different sources. And we didn't have anything that was common. So if you are in a school that functions as a professional learning community, how do you get teams to collaborate around the most essential standards in reading? What does that look like? What are some examples? And that didn't exist. And so I realized if my colleagues, the fellow coaches, didn't have a handbook for how to do this, of course, the teams and the teachers we were supporting didn't have a handbook for how to do this. And I was just riveted that, like, when I look at the Solution Tree website and I see PLC at work and RTI at work and math at work, it's like a table that only has 3 legs, right? We're missing literacy at work. We need to develop that. And fortunately or unfortunately, I went to the airport to fly home after that training weekend and my flight was delayed and delayed. It was over a 3-hour delay, changing gates multiple times. And when it finally got delayed for the last time, I opened up my laptop and in like a matter of 30 minutes had the outline for the chapters for the book. And so it really was, what did we need? It was a very practical problem-solving solution. We need this. It has to exist. I might not be the person to write it, but we got to do this. And it did get put on hold for a little while. And then eventually Paula came on board and we revised that original one to meet our current needs. But that's the birth of it happened at this Arkansas training weekend, realizing that we were a little jealous of our math colleagues that have some great resources and we needed to up our game in the literacy field.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Like, that is like the birth of this like new thing that you're doing, which is not new because literacy and reading is not new. If anything, me being a novice of education, like, we need reading before we need math or anything else. As an immigrant and a Spanish speaker, learning how to read in English and being able to properly understand it and like teach it to myself is so essential before I even read a paragraph of like the math problem. I don't know.
Right. And I think this goes back to your question earlier, Prisma, about reluctant writers. In our introduction, we actually, oh, look, there we go. That was good camera focus. If you don't see the book that you want to read on the shelf, write it. And that's a Beverly Cleary quote. And I think that's really important because Jackie and I were waiting. We talked about this back in 2015. We've been waiting for, I guess, thinking somebody famous would write it, like, oh,
You,
well,
yeah.
there's a big name coming and they're going to write it and it's going to be awesome. And we can't wait for somebody to write this book. And that somebody ended up being us. And so that is yet another point about don't wait. If you need this book and you have an idea because it's not there, if you don't see it and you need it, don't wait, write it.
Yes. But this is through your lens too. Aside from it being through the lens of PLC, it's through you. And then
Right.
also it's relatable. And I believe, I don't remember exactly the date, but wasn't this either before or during COVID? And which is more prevalent to what was going on at that time with reading as well.
It
Yeah.
was it was in the post-COVID when we were still recovering from COVID and dealing with COVID loss and the achievement gaps and how do we close those gaps, was when Paul and I started writing it. But honestly, the literacy landscape wasn't that hot before COVID. And so, when we only have 40% of our fifth graders reading on grade level across the country, we need to do something and we need to get going and get better. So,
That's right.
uh, it COVID did affect the urgency, the need to get this book out there, and I think it also one of our litmus tests for both Paul and I when we buy professional books is educators are busy and our brains are tired, and so there are times where
Everybody.
I can't read more than 3 consecutive pages without some kind of chart, graphic, info, something, bulleted list. And so, like, as we flipped through, we had to make sure that at least every 3 pages there is some tool, user friendly, something or another. And I think some of that was the result of post COVID days too, that we needed something that we could take and hit the ground with because we so many educators did have that sense of urgency that we've got to close these gaps and do it now. So it's while it is very research based, it is not a theoretical how to teach literacy. It's very
No.
practical.
I told my scholars that's called eye candy. When you're reading nonfiction and you get to like land on something that's a template or some sort of table or graph or other source. And I think that's really important. Anyone who is going to engage in this process is going to be in different places, and that is absolutely fine. There is never a time you will hear us say, well, you have to be here, or you're letting kids down, or you're letting your team down. It's where you are is where you start, and what's the next step so that you can continuously grow. And sometimes, even in one campus, teams will be in different places. And so
Often.
yeah, and I think even before COVID, that was the issue. We wanted to make sure as well that this had a shelf life of practical application that addressed any concern we would have because of the interruption of and the disruption of learning. But that it wasn't just geared towards COVID recovery. It is geared towards in any situation where we're trying to bolster reading and literacy for all scholars, that this is going to be that format and framework for you to get started. And I love that, we do have a sense of urgency and we do understand how many scholars are not where they need to be. And the disparity between high income and low income scholars and how that even though we're closing gaps and making gains post COVID in reading and math, the academic achievement gap is actually widening currently. And with students who live in poverty or students who are not in affluent homes and affluent schools. And so again, like, what are we going to do about it? Because we can't admire the problems. We have to find a way to solve it. And I think that's where this book really tries to address, no matter what the era or what the challenge, collaboratively and collectively, here's a framework and system that will allow us to overcome all of that and focus on what we can do and what we can control. So hopefully it isn't like, we don't want it to be categorized as a school improvements for low performing schools or what to do to recover from COVID and COVID learning, because recovering from COVID is different than, I guess, recovering from the interruptions of COVID learning. We just want it to be a timeless, pick it up. Here's a tool. Here's a resource. Tweak it, make it your own, zhuzh it, but start. And that's hopefully what teams will take away.
In chapter 1 of your book, you analyze the importance of embracing collaboration and collective responsibility that represents the T, which is teams from the acronym TEAMS, in page 10. And now, in your experience, how do each of you guide collaboration as it pertains to this book?
So the book is organized into 5 chapters, and so that we coined that acronym TEAMS because we know teachers' brains are tired, and sometimes we need something simple to hold on to, and that stands for what the teams need to do in order to focus on the right work and get higher levels of literacy. So that first chapter, T, means take collective responsibility for learning. And it wouldn't be an educational podcast if somebody didn't quote John Hattie. So everybody's familiar with his research over the last several years. And for quite a few years, collective teacher efficacy was number 1 on his list of things that have a great impact on learning. So we all know we need collective teacher efficacy, but there's not as much research out there about how to build it if you are currently working in a school that doesn't have high levels of teacher efficacy. And the starting point is taking collective responsibility for the learning, right? So when we set team goals, it's not about 80% of my students and 80% of your students will be proficient on this assessment. It's 80% of the second grade students. So they are all our students. And that's very much part of the PLC process, is teams taking collective responsibility. Once you do that, then you start sharing strategies, what's working well, because if I don't share that, we're not going to reach our goal. We've got that common goal. So we talk a lot in that chapter about tools that help, such as having, agendas that drive the work of your collaborative time, and master schedules that incorporate time for that, common shared drives. All of those things are in that chapter, so that you really understand bit by bit, step by step, how can we build towards that collective teacher efficacy that we need.
Yeah. And the other part of coaching that process is systematic. Like, it's just got to be muscle memory. And you don't lift 1,000 pounds at once. You lift 1 pound 1,000 times to build that muscle. And so how do you shape collaboration in a way that is a starting point to get teams going? See what I did there? You get going. And so where can you start so that you are intentionally putting processes in place that are going to lead to another next step and another gain? And then coaching the process for some teams who get the process, but maybe they haven't had the deep dive of really understanding how to utilize data to help them learn about their own professional practices, because they've been focused on data as how scholars learn. And then the teams that are already like high performing, highly effective teams, how do they level up? Because, to quote the British racing team, better never stops. And so how are we constantly finding ways to meet teams where they are and move them forward? Nobody gets to stay where they are, but everybody is moving forward in a way that makes sense for them, in a way that's doable for them, in a way that provides some space and grace to figure this process out and be allowed to mess it up a little bit and say, man, that was awful. We are never doing that again. Or, okay, this actually worked and let's try this. And I think that's really that coaching process Jackie mentioned earlier, leading with questions and that, okay, now what? And okay, and is that too much? Because the other part of our role in supporting teams is making sure they do not inundate themselves with things that are not doable in the time that they have. So it's really just like in our classrooms. We meet scholars where they are and we move them. That coaching piece, and hopefully this book meets every team where they are and gives them one best next step in order to move them forward.
Yeah, but it's one thing to do that with your scholars, and then it's one thing to do that with adults.
Oh, you said it. You said it. Yeah. Heard. Yes. Oh, yeah. Adults are, listen, I mean, if Jackie and I were in a PD together, they would probably have to separate us. Like, I
Mhm.
get it. Like
Yeah.
um, we're adult learners and we are tired. And especially educators that serve in classrooms at this moment have so much that they're accountable for, even beyond the scope of academia. And um, this is an opportunity for us to again go back to, so how do we support them? How do we coach in a way that is lifting them up in something that is doable and practical? Because there's tons of research, there's all kinds of research, but is this research practical and doable in where we are at this moment and for what our scholars need? And I think that's the most important question we can ask.
One of the things we really held ourselves accountable to do when writing this book is making sure that no matter what literacy curriculum you might be using, that you can engage in every single part of the PLC process using whichever resources and curriculum are available to you. And, we were talking about the post-COVID years. There was a lot of ESSER money and people purchased new curriculum. And at the same time, science of reading was gaining ground. And so people were looking at what resources they had and maybe purchasing new things that were more aligned with the science of reading, which meant teams had a lot on their plate that was new. They were using new resources and tools that were unfamiliar to them. And so to do additional literacy professional development on top of that, looking at it as if it's a competing agenda is not what we wanted. We wanted to make sure that whatever tools and resources your district or your school or your team or you yourself are using, that there is a place to determine what is most essential, and there is a place to figure out how am I going to assess and figure out what the students have learned using this, and then aligning those assessments to the essentials and using that feedback, like Paula was saying, not just to put learners into group for reteaching, but also to reflect on your professional practices and grow. And so I think that's one of the things that I'm most proud of, because there's a lot of talk and a lot of national dialogue about literacy right now, and some of it is almost getting in the way of teachers really focusing on what their students need. And some of it is divisive. And uh, there's even a small section in the book called Making Peace with the Reading Wars, because there is this, decades old reading war of, do we focus too much on phonics? Do we focus too much on comprehension? Which way do we go? And we made sure that wherever your school or district currently is and their beliefs and around literacy instruction, this is going to be useful.
Wow. So you anticipated the future.
Oh, honey, we've been
We've
living
lived
it.
through enough iterations. We are famous in education for the pendulum swinging way over here and then way over here,
Oh,
and very
man.
much so in literacy, especially.
Yeah, and I think that was also we've run across a few people that have said, oh, well, your resource isn't aligned to X or your resource isn't aligned to Y. Listen, we intentionally used standards across the United States that all of us are accountable for, because however we ensure students learn the standards, whatever pedagogy and practice and whatever we're aligning our curriculum to, we focused on standards so that there wasn't this perception that we felt that it had to be this way or that way. Because as educators, we also know, and Jackie and I especially, one year we've got it figured out, and then somebody somewhere says, you know what we're going to do? We're going to get a whole new curriculum and you must follow it with
Fidelity.
and so and then you're like, what? But what we should be following with fidelity is the intentional outcomes for all students learning at high levels. So Jackie and I really tried to embrace, let's follow these amazing curriculum resources and tools and ideas with integrity. But teams collectively come together and build outcomes for learners. What resources and how they make that happen, that's the art and the science of teaching. But what we're trying to build is the collective process and a system and structure that lifts teachers up no matter what that format is. We've got you. We've got you.
Wow. Yes. This is amazing. So now in chapter 4 moves to measure evidence of effectiveness. There's an interesting blurb there. Teams may be pros at disaggregating data by students by standard to determine how did they do, but may not be as adept at analyzing the data by asking the question, how did we do? Can you share with us how each of you motivate literacy teams to look inward and collect accountability data?
I think this one is a big turning point for teams. When we work with some high performing teams, teams that have been engaged in the PLC process for quite a while, when you get back to those first three big ideas, those big ideas are that we focus on learning, we do it in a collaborative culture with a results orientation. And most teams think they have a results orientation because they can pull up a spreadsheet with students' names highlighted in red, yellow, and green, and they've got the data. But being data oriented is different than being results oriented. A results orientation means you take that data, you collectively come up with a plan to support the students who aren't yet proficient, implement that, reassess, measure the evidence of the effectiveness, or what we're doing. Is it working or not? Are they getting it? Celebrate the heck out of it when the students move from red to yellow, or even skip over yellow and move from red to green. Like, that's the results orientation. And I think there's a misconception that as long as we are doing assessments and we have data, that we're hitting those three big ideas of the PLC. So a lot of teams, for the get going part, need to start to use common formative assessment data. But for the get better part, they've got to move from using that data to say, okay, I've got these students who are reading below grade level. I'm going to look at my data and I'm going to say, these students need to focus more on decoding, blending sounds and sequence. That's what's holding them back. These students need to focus more on comprehension. Like, teams know how to use the data to help student learning, but where they stop short is using the data to impact themselves, to build their individual and collective practices as a team. And if we don't do that, then next year's students aren't going to do any better than this year's students when we come to this unit. So we make sure that teams ask questions like, at Mason Crest, we used to write comments on our assessments. Dear future us, remember, question number 3 stinks. Redo it next year. So really using the data to say, what can we do differently, either in our tier 1 instruction next year before we come to this assessment, or what are we learning that I taught it the best way I know how the first time around. I've got some students that aren't proficient. I got to lean on my colleagues to improve my practices and get some new tools and ideas so that I can help those students that need more time and support. And we do that systematically. So that is probably one of my favorite chapters, because teams that have made a lot of growth and have kind of stalled, it's hard to go from good to great. This is a place where once they understand that we use data in a different way, it's not just for students, it's for adult learning as well. That big idea of a focus on learning doesn't just stop with students. Adult learning needs to precede it.
We were really good at disaggregating data. We had walls, we had Google, when Google Sheets came on, then Jamboard, like we could sort kids into specific skill groups. And we knew exactly by standard, by target, what scholar needed what. But we never looked at the data from what we needed by standard, by target, in order to make that happen. And the most vulnerable we ever felt was when we asked the question, what do we need? And it was hard in the beginning because as educators, I think we feel like if we didn't get that goal, we let our scholars down, we let each other down, and we had to start to seed it. We started with looking at data without teachers' names on it. And we just looked at it from, this is one way that we shared to get going. Eliminate teachers' names and just look at patterns and say, okay, if you were this teacher, what would be something that you might want to learn more about? And that's where in chapter 4, we shared a data scenario, but we said, okay, what's our glow? What did we do well as a team and then individually? Because it's really important. And Jackie mentioned earlier, you have to name and claim what's going right. What's going right becomes part of the toolkit that you have in order to problem solve when things aren't going the way you want them to be. So you've got to name and claim what's going right as frequently and as relentlessly as you do with, okay, now what's next? So what's going right? What's a glow? And then what's a grow? Where is an opportunity for, in my practice, in my work, in my craft, where's an opportunity for me to get better or even better? And then, okay, what am I going to do about it? And so that's why, Jackie and I said in every team meeting, when you're analyzing data, we're going to look at it from the sense of what do scholars need? And then we're going to look at it from the sense of what do we need as scholars? Because we have to be students of the standards and of learning before we bring the learning to our students. So that grow, glow, and go becomes an actionable response, and it's a game changer. And teams that really feel like they're stuck and they're not seeing results, that's it. That's Jackie and I find it every time we see teams that, oh, we're high performing, we've got this. We say, okay, tell me what you found in your practice that you need to change. And if they're not able to articulate those questions, that's what we find is that secret sauce, that next thing that's just going to push them from good to great or from great to even better.
Oh, that's awesome. I want to see you in action. Like, I want to be there when you're like talking to your educators. That would be so cool to see.
Irving, Texas. What is it? October 21 and 22. We have a 2-day workshop, which is kind of crazy because Solution Tree is letting Paula and I be together in the same place at the same time.
What are they thinking?
That
I
does
don't
not
understand.
happen often. So
That should be a week. I don't know why it's 2 days.
We agree. But we'll take 2 days. We're so grateful.
We're excited.
So grateful. Yeah. And just to have this book resonating with so many people. And I joke, it was an Amazon bestseller. And I joke it's because my grandmother bought all the copies. And if you want one, they're $5 out of her garage in Sarasota, Florida. But just to have the amazing response and the feedback and reviews, and then we have teams calling us and texting us, and Jackie and I still nerd out. Like we didn't write it. We're like, oh, let's do a book study on literacy in a PLC at work. And then Jackie and I are like, yeah, and we wrote it. So maybe we're not going to do the book study or participate in the book study, but maybe we can pop in. And we have teams just saying, can you do a quick author's call with us? We have 2 questions, and emails and texts and messages on social media. The response has been phenomenal. And I think that's what's most important for Jackie and I both, is that this is meant to be something that lifts teachers up. It's meant to be a support and a guide. And the fact that Solution Tree is trusting us to further our support of literacy teams by a 2-day workshop is beyond a dream come true. And it's we're really proud of it and super shocked. And we hope that everybody joins us. And not because we want a sold out crowd, but because we just want to nerd out and geek out with all our literacy colleagues about how we can help serve this great purpose and this great mission together. So we're excited. And Jackie's right. The 2 of us together, come on, like be prepared to laugh a little.
A lot.
And not take it all so seriously.
It's just so necessary because they can relate to you on a scholarly level, but also as people, because they're humans. You're humans.
Oh boy.
Paula and I work with the district in California, High Fenton crowd, but we're never there at the same time. She works with a few schools in the district. I work with some other schools in the district. And one of them said to me last time, how does Paula not have an improv group? It's like, well, you talk to her next time she's here, and I think she'll take care of that. And maybe that will be in her retirement too. So yes, it is always fun.
We do have a blast, but I think when you're passionate, this is why I feel so lucky to be a part of this organization. Even, I, of course, get to partner with brilliant educators all over the US, but I think particularly the group that lead the PLC at work process. I think that's what is such a joy, because our passion and commitment and dedication and just that sense of community for this greater purpose, and holding each other mutually accountable for that work, and ensuring that we do the right work in the right way in order to support this team. I feel like this is the greatest gift I've been given in my career. And I just want other people to feel that level of support. And hopefully our book is one small part of that, but the book is only a small measure of our intention, and being able to do this every day with teams for exponential impact with scholars. I mean, I don't know that I could ask for better. I don't.
And especially the literacy part of it. Like, we all carry with us those faces of the students who, for Hyro, I did not unlock the code for him. We sent him on to middle school, not being able to read at even a third grade level. And what happened to him? We all carry those kids with us. And so
every day.
think that's where our great pride in helping so many teams better their work around getting more scholars to be highly literate is such a passion project. So it's a way to go back and apologize to all the Hyros from the 90s and early 2000s in my career that I didn't know how to help then. So we're doing right by them now the best we can.
Well, to quote the late, great, beautiful poet Maya Angelou, when you know better, you do better. And we know better. And so let's do better. Let's get going.
And get better.
That's right. And more than anything, the fact that you were still agents of change, you're still doing it and you're still being active, and that can only enhance everybody around you and every effort that you put out there. So it has been a complete honor to just be here, just share this space, share these couple of minutes and moments with you, just learning really from you. I really am so blessed to have met you, and then also to be speaking to you, but also to have interviewed you today. So thank you so much for this informative conversation. As we learn more about how educators can support student proficiency and literacy, but also learn more about you as well. And then thank you so, so much for your time.
Thank you.
It was an honor. Thank you, Prisma. You're such a light. Thank you.
This book is indeed another tool for your toolbox with teaching. Make an impact in your classroom as you explore the practical research-affirmed framework from this book that supports how teams can better sustain change and improve as literacy educators. This book is available on the Solution Tree website, solutiontree.com. Look for Literacy in a PLC at Work, guiding teams to get going and get better in grades K through 6 reading by Paula Maker and Jackie Heller. Now, for our sponsor message here at Solution Tree, we share your vision to transform education to ensure learning for all. And we can help you make this vision a reality. No other professional learning company provides our unique blend of research-based, results-driven services that improve learning outcomes for students. All right, we appreciate you tuning in. Make sure to navigate to our website, solutiontree.com/podcast, to listen to our other episodes. There, you can subscribe to the podcast today on your favorite podcast app. Also, navigate to our Solution Tree YouTube channel to like our episodes, and then also subscribe to our channel. This has been your host, Prisma Lopez Marin. Thank you for joining our Solution Tree podcast as we all venture to charting new paths in pre-K through 12 education.